So, Arush, we'll take this topic complex numbers today. Now, before we understand what are complex numbers, I'll give you a reference from 10th standard quadratic equations. If you remember, in 10th standard in quadratic equations, we had a formula method of solving quadratic. Do you remember the formula by any chance?
What, sir? अच्छा,
Do you
this
remember
minus b plus minus 2b square minus
root
4ac
of
upon
b
2.
square minus 4ac upon 2a? And along with this,
Yeah.
there were some conditions. If you remember, we had conditions b square minus 4ac greater than 0, equal to 0, less than 0. If b square minus 4ac is greater than 0, then the roots are real
Real.
and unequal. If the value of b square minus 4ac is 0, it is real and equal.
And equal.
And
Yeah.
if it is less than 0, then it is not real.
Not
Do you remember
real.
that?
Yes, sir.
And इसको हम बोलते थे imaginary.
हाँ.
So this actually, the not real wala part, the imaginary wala part, this is complex numbers. So I'll tell you how does this work. Basically, b square minus 4ac is inside square root, right? So the thing is
Yeah.
that inside square root, negative number is actually not accepted. Till 10th, we had this concept that inside square root, negative is not allowed.
Hmm.
If it is negative, then it will not be a real number. फॉर
Yeah.
एग्जाम्पल अगर हम इसकी बात करें रूट ऑफ माइनस वन फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर मैं इसको x अज्यूम करूँ सपोज रूट माइनस वन का कुछ तो वैल्यू होगा x एंड इफ वी स्क्वायर बोथ
हाँ.
साइड्स वी गेट x square is equal to minus one. But from the very beginning when we started algebra we have been studying that squares cannot be negative.
Yeah.
तो बात ऐसी है that squares of real numbers cannot be negative. That is basically real numbers which we had till 10th standard. But now we
Hmm.
have those numbers where inside square root negative is acceptable, and that is in fact complex number. So let us understand some important notations. The first is root of minus 1 जो है will be denoted by I.
I.
It's a
Yeah.
Greek symbol जैसे अल्फा बीटा गामा डेल्टा होता है. This is a Greek symbol. It's called iota. And you
Iota.
can remember it as I for imaginary. ऐसे भी याद रख सकते हैं इसको. So root of minus 1 is equal to I. So now you tell me what will be root of minus 9. If I ask you what is
9,
root of
9.
minus 9, no, 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 no. It will not be 9i. See, root of minus 9 can be written as
So
root
root
9 into root
9.
minus 1. What is root 9?
Root 9, 9. So 3i.
3i.
Root 9, 9 to 3i.
Root 9 is 3. So 3i. So this is how it works. Okay, now let's understand some important powers of I. So we know that I is root of minus 1. So tell me what is I square?
Minus 1.
Minus 1. What is I cube? So to find I cube, we can do I square into I. But what is I square?
Minus 1.
So this is minus 1 into I, which
Minus
is
I.
minus I.
Minus
अच्छा
I.
नेक्स्ट I रेस टू 4 कैसे फाइंड करेंगे? तो I रेस टू 4 हो जाएगा I
I
स्क्वायर का
square.
स्क्वायर.
Plus
तो I
square.
स्क्वायर का स्क्वायर,
So 1.
which is plus 1. Okay, now two important things which you have to understand about these powers of I. If I find I raised to 5 now, how will we find I raised to 5? So I raised to 5 होता है I raised to 4 into I. And what is I raised to 4?
1.
तो इसका आंसर I आ जाएगा. अच्छा, I raised to
हाँ.
6 अगर हम फाइंड करें, this will be I raised to 4 into I square. So what will we
Yeah.
get?
Minus 1.
Minus 1. If we take I raised to 7 तो ये होगा I raised to 4 into I cube. ये तो 1 है, this is minus I. So are you observing
So
something?
minus.
Do you realize, Arush,
Yes.
that these powers are just repeating again, and this will just keep
Yeah.
on happening after every 4. If you take any 4 consecutive powers of I, there will be these 4 powers.
Yeah.
So these 4 powers will just keep on repeating I minus 1 minus I 1 and in the same sequence.
Yes, sir.
Second thing, let's see what happens if we add these 4 powers. If we add I square, I raised to 3 and I raised to 4. तो ये I है, I square Arush is minus 1, I
Yeah.
cube is minus I and I raised to 4 is 1. तो
1.
क्या होगा आरुष? इसका आंसर क्या आएगा?
0.
So if you add any four consecutive powers like I raised to 20, I raised to 21, I raised to 22, I raised to 23, take any four consecutive powers, addition is always zero.
हाँ सर.
ठीक है?
Yeah.
Sure. So let us proceed now to more terms and more concepts. The next thing is standard form of a complex number. Every complex number looks in a certain format. It will be in a certain format. That format is, it will be denoted by Z Arush throughout the chapter. Z will denote a complex number, small letter Z, and the complex number will be of the format A plus IB, where A and B will be real numbers. ठीक है, ए एंड बी विल बी रियल नंबर्स. तो ए को हम बोलेंगे रियल पार्ट, एंड दिस इज अ सिंबल आर ई ब्रैकेट जेड, इसको हम बोलते हैं रियल पार्ट ऑफ जेड. बी जो है यहाँ पे, बी विल बी दी, आई बी इज इमेजिनरी पार्ट, तो हम बी को यहाँ पे बोलने वाले हैं बी इज रियल नंबर, बट बिकॉज आई इज एसोसिएटेड विद इट, इट्स कॉल्ड इमेजिनरी पार्ट ऑफ जेड. ठीक है, एंड ए एंड बी आर रियल नंबर्स, दे कैन बी एनी नंबर्स, पॉजिटिव, नेगेटिव, फ्रैक्शन, डेसिमल, स्क्वायर रूट्स, एनीथिंग, बट रियल नंबर्स. अब कुछ
Yes.
एग्जांपल्स लेते हैं. इफ वी टेक दिस कॉम्प्लेक्स नंबर z इक्वल टू 3 minus 2i, कैन यू टेल मी व्हाट इज द रियल पार्ट एंड व्हाट इज द इमेजिनरी पार्ट, लाइक व्हाट इज a and what is b over here?
3 is the real part and 2y is the imaginary.
3 is the real part and 2i नहीं, minus 2i, it's with the sign,
Minus
right?
2y.
अच्छा,
Yeah.
अब यहाँ पे देख, ये एक एग्जांपल लिया है मैंने. लेट्स से इफ a is 0 सपोज, so if we take z
Hmm.
is equal to 4i, a 0 ले लिया है हमने. Over here Arush, z is equal to 4i. This is called a purely imaginary number, क्योंकि इसमें रियल पार्ट है ही नहीं, only imaginary part is there.
हाँ सर.
And if we take b as 0, फॉर एग्जाम्पल z इज इक्वल टू 2, तो इसको हम बोलेंगे प्योरली रियल नंबर, या रियल नंबर जो हम बोलते हैं, जो हमने 10th तक पढ़ा है. वी हैव स्टडीड दीज नंबर्स बेसिकली, बट द इमेजिनरी पार्ट
Hmm.
वाज नेवर देयर.
Yeah.
डन, आगे बढ़े.
8 sir.
श्योर. The next thing that we have is conjugate of a complex number. So if we have a complex number z arush a plus ib, conjugate का symbol होता है z bar. Now conjugate is something which you have already studied. इसको हम rationalizing भी बोलते हैं, rationalizing denominator बचपन में सीखा हमने. If we have 1 upon
हाँ.
root 3 minus 1, do you remember? We change the sign of middle term and multiply,
Yeah.
divide.
Yeah.
So this same thing is conjugate. So if I ask you what is conjugate of root 3 minus 1, it is root 3 plus 1. Same concept works in complex numbers. What is the conjugate of a plus ib? So it is a minus ib.
3
You
minus
have to
1.
change the sign of middle term, but to be more precise, you have to actually change the sign of the imaginary part. जो
Hmm.
imaginary part है ib, उसका sign change कर दिया हमने, उसको कर दिया minus ib. So if we have minus 3 plus 2i, the conjugate will be minus 3 minus 2i. And
Minus.
this is the symbol z bar, z के ऊपर एक dash, एक line.
हाँ सर.
तो अब इसके कुछ प्रॉपर्टीज देखते हैं. जस्ट गिव मी अ मिनट. चलो, so now Arush, properties of conjugate of complex number. So if we have a complex number z which is 3 plus 2y, what will be the conjugate of this complex number?
3 minus 2y.
And now if we take the conjugate of z bar, तो z bar का अगर conjugate लेंगे, will come back to the original number. So
Yeah.
conjugate of conjugate is the original complex number. That is the property. ठीक
हाँ
है,
सर.
बेसिक एकदम लॉजिकल प्रॉपर्टी. नेक्स्ट, सेकंड इज, if z is a purely imaginary number, Arush, here z is a purely imaginary number, 0 plus 2i, what is the conjugate in this case?
Minus 2y.
So what we can say is, we can directly say that z bar is negative of z in case of a
Yeah.
purely imaginary number. And let's see what happens in case of a real number. So this is a purely real number. अब इसका conjugate क्या होगा? 3 plus 0i का conjugate,
3 minus sorry 3. 3
which
right.
is same, right? Do you realize z bar is exactly equal to z if it is a purely real number?
Hmm.
Are you following this?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we have now z and z bar, okay, z is 3 plus 2i, z bar is 3 minus 2i. You tell me, Arush, what happens when we add z with z bar? Just add z with z bar, what will we get?
3,
नहीं नहीं, 3 कैसे आएगा? 3 plus 3 6
6
आएगा ना. It will
3
be
plus
double
6.
of 3 basically, right? So is it safe to say, Arush, that when you add z with z bar, it is twice of the real part of z?
Yeah,
So what is real part of z from here? तो यहाँ पे एक फॉर्मूला बनता है, real part of z is z plus z bar upon 2. देखो ये समझा?
हाँ,
Okay, now let's see what happens if we subtract z with z bar. So if z is equal to 3 plus 2i and z bar is equal to 3 minus 2i, subtract z with z bar, what will we get?
4i.
Correct, we will get 4i. So is it safe to say that it is 2 times imaginary part of z into i?
Yeah,
तो यहां से आई एम मतलब इमेजिनरी पार्ट ऑफ z का फॉर्मूला क्या बनेगा? तो इमेजिनरी पार्ट ऑफ z विल बी z माइनस z बार अपॉन 2i, आरुष.
yeah.
अच्छा, एंड व्हेन वी ऐड सब्ट्रैक्ट और मल्टीप्लाई डिवाइड, तो हम कॉन्जुगेट को स्प्लिट कर सकते हैं. What does that mean? That if you have two complex numbers, you add them first and then take the conjugate, or you take the conjugate first and then add. Answer will be the same.
Yeah,
And the same works for subtraction, multiplication, and even division, provided z2 bar मतलब denominator zero नहीं होना चाहिए. That is the only condition. बाकी
mm,
these properties will hold true. So these are the properties of conjugate. Are you writing this or shall we proceed?
I'll write them.
Sure, write this. So now, Arush, let us understand how will we add complex numbers, subtract complex numbers, multiply and divide. ठीक है? तो एडिशन, सब्ट्रैक्शन और मल्टीप्लिकेशन ओरली करेंगे, बहुत बेसिक है. डिवीजन तो एक हम लोग पेपर पे सॉल्व करेंगे बिकॉज डिवीजन विल कवर एवरीथिंग. चलो, so addition of complex numbers, if these are two complex numbers, we have to add them, Arush. The rule is very
Mm,
simple. You have to simply add like terms. Add real part with real part, imaginary part with imaginary part. So tell me what will be the answer.
minus 4 plus 2i.
Done. That is the answer. चलो नेक्स्ट आता है सब्ट्रैक्शन पे. सब्ट्रैक्शन इज अगेन द सेम थिंग, जस्ट add subtract like terms. So tell me the answer.
10 minus 6i.
10 minus 6i, बराबर है. चलो, now coming to multiplication. Multiplication is like basic multiplication that we do with brackets. So this 3 will be multiplied with both and minus 2i will be multiplied with both. So let's do
Yes,
this
sir.
orally. When 3 is multiplied with both, what do we get?
Minus 21 and plus 12i.
And plus 12i, correct है? And when minus 2i is multiplied with both, so minus 2i into minus 7.
40 plus 49 minus 8, so 8i square.
Correct, so you'll get plus 49 minus 8i square. Now what can we do with I square?
So I square is
So I square
minus
will be
16.
minus 1, and here we have 12i plus 14i, which will become 26i, and I square is minus 1. So minus into minus हो जाएगा plus 1, so we get plus 8.
Ah,
And minus 21 plus 8 will be minus 13. So this is
minus
answer.
13.
Yeah.
Yes.
चलो अब
Yes, sir.
डिवीजन करते हैं. डिवीजन तो खुद पेपर पे ट्राई करेगा. आई जस्ट गिव यू द फर्स्ट स्टेप. आई टेल यू व्हाट इज टू बी डन. See, when we divide two complex numbers, the rule is that in a complex number, denominator should not have I. We'll have to remove I from the denominator. And for that, what we will do is we will multiply, divide by the conjugate of the denominator. What is the
Hmm.
conjugate of the denominator?
3 minus 4i.
तो हम ऊपर नीचे 3 minus 4i से multiply divide करेंगे. Now do you realize, Arush, numerator will be basic expansion of brackets, like just normal multiplication, and
Hmm.
denominator is one of the expansion formulas. Which formula can you see in the denominator?
A square minus b square.
तो अब तू आगे solve कर and tell me the final answer. Solve this on your own.
Awesome.
Chalo, so this should be our answer. 13 minus 34 I upon 25. So now let's proceed to the
Yes.
next part. Now we are
Yeah.
going to take two very important concepts. Two concepts which are like the most important in complex numbers. The first one is cube roots of unity. तो इसको मैं थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन करता हूँ प्रूफ के साथ. आई शो यू व्हाट इज द प्रूफ एंड देन आई गिव यू द फॉर्मूला. तो थोड़ा एकदम कन्विंस हो जाएगा तू. बट फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल लेट मी चेक योर नॉलेज. व्हाट इज क्यूब रूट से यूनिटी मतलब नंबर वन बेसिकली. व्हाट इज क्यूब रूट ऑफ वन आरुष?
One.
वन तो ये बचपन से हमने सीखा है. क्यूब रूट ऑफ वन इज वन. तो एक काम करते हैं, अजम्पशन लेते हैं दैट क्यूब रूट ऑफ वन इज एक्स. ठीक है, ऐसा एक अजम्पशन लेते हैं. नाउ व्हेन वी रिमूव द
हाँ.
क्यूब रूट, हाउ डू वी रिमूव क्यूब रूट फ्रॉम बोथ साइड्स?
We cube both
We
sides.
cube both sides. So what will we get if we cube both sides over here? We will get
One
x
is
cube
equal
is
to
equal
x
to वन.
cube.
बराबर है. अब है ना algebra का एक
हाँ.
रूल है आरुष. I hope you already know this. There is a basic fundamental rule of algebra that the number of answers of a particular equation is always equal to the highest power of the variable x. In this equation, x cube minus 1 equal to 0. What is the highest power of x?
Three.
तो एक्चुअली कितने आंसर्स होने चाहिए आरुष? एक्चुअली देयर शुड बी थ्री
Three.
आंसर्स. और बचपन से हमने तो एक ही आंसर पढ़ा है कि x इज वन. उसका रीजन ये है दैट द अदर टू आंसर्स आर कॉम्प्लेक्स नंबर्स.
Hmm.
तो अब वो हम डिस्कस करने वाले हैं यहाँ पे. So I've taken one on the left. We have x cube minus 1 cube equal to 0. Do you realize this is one of the expansion formulas, a cube minus b cube?
Yes.
So what is the formula for a cube minus b cube?
A minus b into a square plus ab plus b square.
And now we'll get two possibilities. One is x equal to 1. Other is x plus 1 equal to 0. बराबर?
Yeah.
Now this x square plus x plus 1 equal to 0, Arush, you have to solve